the twin sons of Arendor cast a golden hue over the dusty streets and humble abodes of its inhabitants. The planet was a place of stark contrasts, where opulence and destitution coexisted uneasily. In the heart of one of its poorest districts, amidst crumbling buildings and narrow alleyways, lived a family whose story would soon intertwine with fate in unforeseen ways. Xania, the eldest of 5 children, emerged each morning before dawn to help her mother with the daily chores. The family's small, dilapidated home was perpetually filled with the sounds of her siblings' laughter and cries, a cacophony that underscored their struggle for survival. Her mother, a tireless woman with kind eyes and a gentle touch, dedicated her life to caring for her children. She was the pillar of their family, holding them together with unwavering strength and boundless love. Her father, a servant to one of Arendor's wealthiest families, worked long hours for meager pay. Each day he toiled away in the grand estate of Zeski, an affluent young alien known for his wealth and influence. The disparity between their lives and his employers was a constant reminder of the inequality that permeated their society. Despite their hardships, Xania's family found solace in each other. Her siblings, with their wide-eyed innocence, looked up to her with admiration and trust. Xania, with her striking features and kind heart, often dreamed of a better life for herself and her family. She longed for the day when they wouldn't have to worry about their next meal or the roof over their heads. Yet she also knew that dreams alone wouldn't change their reality. One sweltering afternoon, Xania accompanied her father to the estate where he worked. The sprawling grounds and majestic architecture of Zeski's home were a stark contrast to the humble quarters she called home. As she wandered through the gardens, admiring the vibrant flora and ornate statues, she felt a mixture of awe and resentment. It was here, amidst the splendor of Zeski's wealth, that her life would take an unexpected turn. Xania's beauty was undeniable. Her deep violet eyes held a depth of emotion that could captivate anyone who met her gaze. Her long, silken hair flowed like a river of night, framing her delicate features. As she moved through the estate, her grace and poise caught the attention of none other than Zeski himself. Xania walked beside her father, her eyes wide with wonder and a hint of trepidation. This was a world she had only heard of in stories, a realm of opulence and luxury, far removed from the struggles of her everyday life. Her father, sensing her unease, gave her a reassuring smile and a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Remember, Xania," he said softly, "we must always be respectful and humble. These people have the power to change our lives." As they approached the mansion's entrance, Xania's father was greeted by other servants who regarded Xania with curiosity. Her presence was unusual. Servants rarely brought their families to work. Yet Xania's father had a reason. He wanted to show his daughter the kind of life he wished for her, a life free from the shackles of poverty. Inside the mansion, the air was cool and fragrant, filled with the scent of exotic flowers and the soft hum of distant music. Xania's eyes darted around, taking in the grandeur, the crystal chandeliers that sparkled like captured starlight, the richly woven tapestries depicting scenes of heroism and beauty, and the polished floors that reflected the splendor of the surroundings. Her father led her through the halls, past rooms filled with treasures she could barely comprehend. In one room, a grand piano stood, its keys gleaming invitingly. In another, shelves lined with ancient books whispered of knowledge and secrets. Xania's heart pounded with a mix of awe and intimidation. As they neared the heart of the mansion, they were stopped by a tall, imposing figure. Zeski, the master of the estate, stood before them. He was young, perhaps in his early 30s, with a commanding presence that seemed to fill the room. His dark eyes, sharp and calculating, took in every detail with a predatory gaze. "Who is this?" Zeski's voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it that made Xania's father stiffen. "A new servant." "This is my daughter," Xania, her father replied, bowing his head respectfully. "I brought her to help me today, if that's acceptable, sir." Zeski's gaze shifted to Xania, and she felt a chill run down her spine. He studied her intently, his eyes lingering on her delicate features and the way she carried herself. There was an air of innocence about her, a raw beauty that set her apart from the usual crowd that frequented his halls. "Xania," Zeski repeated, as if tasting the name. He took a step closer, and Xania fought the urge to step back. A lovely name for a lovely girl. Xania managed a small nod, her voice caught in her throat. She felt exposed under his scrutiny, as if he could see into her very soul. Zeski's interest was palpable, and it unsettled her. "Very well," Zeski said finally, his gaze still locked on Xenia. "She may assist you today." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Xenia and her father to continue their duties. As they moved through the mansion, Xenia couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Zeski's intense gaze haunted her, filling her with a sense of foreboding. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Xenia helped her father with various tasks, all the while feeling the weight of Zeski's presence. His interest in her was clear, and it made her uneasy. She couldn't understand why someone of his stature would pay any attention to a servant's daughter. 3 days later, Xenia's father called her into the small kitchen of their home. His face was pale, his eyes troubled. "Xenia, we need to talk," he began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Zeski has made us an offer." Xenia's heart sank. "An offer?" He wants you," Xenia, her father said, his voice breaking. "He has offered us a large sum of money in exchange for you." The world seemed to tilt around Xenia. She felt as if she were drowning, her father's words pulling her under. "Father, no, you can't." Tears welled in her father's eyes. "We are barely surviving, Xenia. This money could change everything for us. It could give your siblings a chance at a better life." "But what about me?" Xenia cried, her voice trembling. "What kind of life will I have with him?" Her father took her hands in his grip firm but trembling. "I don't know, Xenia. I don't know, but I have to think of the family. I have to think of your brothers and sisters." Xenia pulled her hands away, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your family too." Her father's face crumpled, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Xenia. I'm so sorry." 2 days later, Xenia stood in the grand hall of Zeski's mansion, her heart heavy with fear and sadness. She was now his, handed over like a possession. As she looked around at the opulence that surrounded her, she felt a deep sense of loss. The future she had dreamed of was gone, replaced by an uncertain and frightening reality. Zeski approached her, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Welcome to your new home, Xenia," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm sure you'll learn to love it here." Xenia met his gaze with a defiant glare, her spirit unbroken despite the circumstances. "I will never love it here," she replied, her voice steady. Zeski's smile widened, a cold, cruel expression. "We'll see about that." As the doors of the mansion closed behind her, Xenia felt a sense of finality settle over her. Her life had changed forever, and the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. But even in the face of such adversity, she vowed to remain strong. She would endure, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The day Xenia arrived at Zeski's grand estate, she felt a heavy weight settle over her heart. The mansion, with its towering spires and lush gardens, was a stark contrast to her humble family home. But beneath the grandeur lay a suffocating coldness, a reminder that she was here not by choice but by force. The marriage was conducted in haste, devoid of any celebration or joy. There were no flowers, no music, no family to witness the union. Xenia stood beside Zeski in a small, dimly lit room, her hands trembling as she whispered the vows that felt like chains wrapping around her soul. Zeski, ever the picture of control, showed no emotion, his eyes fixed on her with a mix of desire and expectation. From the moment they were pronounced husband and wife, Xenia's life became a series of unending demands and relentless pressure. Zeski was eager for an heir, a child who would carry on his legacy and cement his status. His desire for a family was not born of love, but of ambition and pride. He saw Xenia not as a partner but as a vessel for his aspirations. Their attempts to conceive began immediately. Each night, Xenia braced herself for Zeski's touch, her heart heavy with dread. She felt like a prisoner in her own body, trapped in a cycle of hope and despair. The months passed, and with each failed attempt, Zeski's patience wore thin. His frustration turned to anger, and he began to lash out, his words cutting deeper than any physical blow. "You are useless," he spat one evening, his face twisted with rage. "I paid a fortune for you, and you can't even give me a child." Xenia's eyes filled with tears, but she bit her lip, refusing to let him see her cry. She had no defense, no words that could soothe his wrath. She was alone in her misery, isolated from the world outside the mansion's walls. The servants avoided her, their eyes downcast whenever she passed. She was a ghost, a shadow in the halls of her husband's home. Her days were spent in silence, her nights in torment. The only solace she found was in the garden, a small patch of earth where she could escape Zeski's oppressive presence. There, among the flowers and the trees, she would close her eyes and dream of a different life, a life where she was free. But freedom was a distant dream, and reality was unforgiving. One evening, after yet another argument, Zeski's temper reached its breaking point. He grabbed Xenia by the arm and dragged her to the door, his grip like iron. "Get out," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "You're nothing to me. I don't ever want to see you again." He shoved her outside, and the door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing in the night. Xenia stood there, stunned and shivering in the cold. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Desperation clawed at her heart as she began to walk, her steps unsteady. The journey back to her family's home was long and arduous. She trudged through the dark streets, her mind a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. When she finally arrived, hope surged within her only to be crushed when she found the house abandoned. Her family had moved on, leaving no trace of their whereabouts. Heartbroken and exhausted, Xenia wandered into the desolate deserts of Arendor. The once familiar landscape now seemed alien and unforgiving. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and the nights were freezing. She had no food, no water, and her strength waned with each passing hour. One afternoon, as the suns began their slow descent towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, Xenia's vision blurred. The heat and exhaustion finally took their toll. She stumbled, falling to her knees in the hot sand. The world around her swam and shifted, and she knew she could go no further. Her strength was gone, and the darkness at the edge of her vision threatened to consume her entirely. With her last ounce of energy, she whispered a prayer to the universe, a plea for mercy and deliverance. As the darkness closed in, she felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. She had done all she could. If this was to be her end, she would face it with dignity, knowing she had fought until her last breath. But fate had other plans. Just as consciousness slipped away, she saw a shadow move across the sands, blocking the harsh light of the setting suns. Strong arms lifted her from the ground, and she felt the cool touch of metal against her skin as she was carried away. She tried to open her eyes, to see her savior, but the darkness claimed her too quickly. When Xenia awoke, she found herself lying on a soft bed, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of soap and fresh linen. The gentle hum of machinery filled the air, a stark contrast to the silence of the desert. Her mind, still foggy, struggled to piece together her last memories. The sensation of cool air against her skin brought a relief so profound that it almost brought tears to her eyes. A door hissed open, and a figure stepped into the room. Xenia's eyes widened as she took in the sight of a human man. Tall and lean, with kind eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the stars, he approached her with a cautious yet reassuring smile. "Hello," he said softly, his voice soothing. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" Xenia struggled to sit up, her body still weak. "Where am I?" she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse. "You're on my ship," the man replied. "My name is Luke. I found you in the desert and brought you here. You're safe now." As Luke spoke, he handed her a cup of water. Xenia drank greedily, the cool liquid revitalizing her parched throat. She looked up at Luke, her eyes filled with gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Luke nodded, his expression serious. "You were in a bad way. It's a good thing I decided to take a detour through that part of the desert. But tell me, what happened to you? How did you end up out there?" Xenia took a deep breath, the weight of her experiences pressing down on her. She began to recount her story, starting with her humble beginnings and the fateful day Zeski had taken her away. As she spoke of her loveless marriage and Zeski's cruelty, tears welled up in her eyes. Luke listened intently, his brow furrowing with empathy and anger at the injustices she had endured. When she finished, there was a heavy silence in the room. Luke shook his head, his eyes blazing with determination. "You've been through so much, Xenia, but you're not alone anymore. You can stay here with me until you figure out what you want to do next." Xenia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Luke. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Luke smiled, his demeanor gentle. No need for repayment. Sometimes, helping someone is its own reward. Besides, it's nice to have company on this ship. It gets lonely out here in the vastness of space. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship deepened. They worked side by side, tending to the ship's maintenance and sharing meals in the small galley. Xenia discovered that Luke had a talent for cooking, and she often found herself looking forward to their dinners together, where laughter and conversation flowed freely. One particularly memorable evening, Luke prepared a dish from his home planet, a hearty stew that filled the ship with a mouth-watering aroma. As they sat down to eat, Xenia couldn't help but smile at the sight of Luke's hopeful expression. "I hope you like it," he said, serving her a generous portion. Xenia took a bite and closed her eyes, savoring the rich flavors. "It's delicious, Luke." "Thank you." He grinned, a boyish charm that made her heart flutter. "I'm glad. It's one of my favorites." As they finished their meal, Xenia felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of belonging that had eluded her for so long. She reached across the table, placing her hand over Luke's. The contact was electric, sending a shiver down her spine. "Luke," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. You've given me a second chance at life, and I'll always be grateful." Luke's eyes softened, and he gently squeezed her hand. "You don't have to thank me, Xenia. I'm just glad you're here." That night, as Xenia lay in her bunk, she couldn't stop thinking about Luke. His kindness, his strength, his unwavering support, they had all touched her deeply. She realized that her feelings for him had grown into something more than just gratitude or friendship. She was falling in love with him, and the thought both excited and terrified her. The next day, Xenia decided to take a bold step. She found Luke in the cockpit, adjusting the ship's course. Taking a deep breath, she approached him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Luke, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. He turned to her, concern etched on his face. "What is it, Xenia?" She took his hand, looking into his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through together. And I've realized that I care for you deeply. I love you, Luke." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Luke's expression softened, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace. "I love you too, Xenia. More than words can say." Their confession marked a new chapter in their relationship. The bond they shared grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by their mutual respect and admiration. They navigated the challenges of life and space together, finding strength in their love and the promise of a brighter future. 1 month after their heartfelt confessions, Luke proposed to Xenia under the starlit expanse of the observation deck. With tears of joy in her eyes, Xenia accepted, knowing that she had finally found the happiness and love she had longed for. Their journey together had only just begun, and they faced it with hearts full of hope and determination, ready to embrace whatever the cosmos had in store for them. Xenia stood by the viewport of the spaceship, gazing out at the infinite expanse of stars. The twinkling lights of distant galaxies seemed to call out to her, whispering promises of possibilities yet to come. Despite the warmth and love she had found with Luke, a shadow of doubt lingered in her heart. The memories of Zeski's anger and accusations were like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow her newfound happiness. Luke watched her from across the room, sensing her unease. He had grown to understand the nuances of her expressions, the way her eyes would glaze over when she was lost in thought. He approached her silently, his footsteps barely making a sound on the polished metal floor. Gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder, breaking her reverie. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly, his voice filled with concern. Xenia turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the turmoil within. I can't help but think about what happened with Zeski. His words still haunt me. What if? What if he was right? What if I can't have children?" Luke's heart ached at the sight of her distress. He pulled her into a comforting embrace, holding her close. "Xenia, you are not defined by his cruelty. You are strong, and you are worthy of love and happiness. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Xenia leaned into his embrace, finding solace in his words. But the desire for a child, for proof that she was not at fault, gnawed at her. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with pleading eyes. "Luke, I need to know. I need to try. Will you help me?" Luke sighed, torn between his protective instincts and his love for her. He had seen the depths of her pain, and he wanted nothing more than to shield her from further heartache. But he also understood the importance of this to her. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. "All right," he said softly, "we'll try. But promise me that you'll take care of yourself no matter what happens." Xenia nodded, a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "I promise." The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. They adjusted their routines to create a serene and nurturing environment, focusing on their bond and the love they shared. Luke took extra care to make Xenia feel cherished, surprising her with small gestures, flowers he had managed to procure from a distant spaceport, her favorite meals, and quiet evenings spent stargazing. Despite their best efforts, the process was fraught with anxiety. Every passing day brought a new wave of doubt and fear. Xenia tried to remain hopeful, but the weight of her past loomed large. She found herself praying to the stars, seeking solace in their ancient light. Then, one morning, everything changed. Xenia awoke with a peculiar feeling, a mix of excitement and trepidation. She placed a hand on her abdomen, feeling a warmth that seemed to radiate from within. Could it be? She didn't dare to hope, but as the days went by, the signs became undeniable. She experienced a dizzy spell, followed by a bout of nausea that left her breathless. Finally, she decided to share her suspicions with Luke. They sat together in the ship's cozy living quarters, the soft hum of the engines a comforting backdrop. Xenia took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "Luke," she began, her voice trembling with anticipation. I think I might be pregnant." Luke's eyes widened, a mix of astonishment and joy spreading across his face. "Are you sure?" Xenia nodded, tears of happiness welling up in her eyes. "I feel it, Luke. I just know." They embraced, their hearts beating in unison. The months that followed were a time of joy and preparation. Xenia's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she reveled in the experience. She found herself marveling at the changes in her body, each day bringing new wonders. Luke was a constant source of support, his excitement and love unwavering. They talked about their dreams for the future, imagining the life they would build for their child. The spaceship, once a symbol of their escape, now felt like a home, a place filled with hope and love. As the time of birth drew near, Xenia couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced unimaginable hardships, but those trials had led her to Luke, and now to this moment of profound happiness. One evening, as they sat together beneath the stars, Luke took Xenia's hand and placed it on her growing belly. "This child is a testament to our love, Xenia. No matter what we've been through, we found our way to each other, and now we're creating something beautiful." Xenia smiled, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "Yes, Luke, our journey has been long and difficult, but it's led us to this moment, and I wouldn't change a thing." As they gazed up at the vast expanse of the cosmos, they knew that their future was bright. Together they had overcome their pasts, and now they faced the future with hope, ready to welcome the new life they had created.